No, we don't.
Nobody even knows.
Yes. Okay, approval of minutes of previous finance and HR meeting. Your pleasure.
Make a motion to approve the previous minutes for the Finance and HR Committee meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Hackbarth, second by Minell. On the question, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Public comments. Anyone here for, or online or Zoom? Nothing? Okay, thank you. Acknowledge work product transmittals, May budget status report.
Move to acknowledge budget status report.
Motion by Pittsell,
I'll second that.
second by Minell. On the question, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. TIF 1 and TIF 2 detail reports for May. Able to look at that and have any questions or just? I think it's more for information than anything else.
Because the big things going on in TIF right now is Weston Avenue. That's in Fund 40. So if you look up the 40, you'll see quite a few expenditures in that, purchasing of land and then of water main.
Now, is the water main, I was gonna ask, is that in the, is that a TIF expense or is that a water utility expense?
TIF expense.
Okay, it is, okay.
It's gonna be contributed to the water utility.
Okay. All right, any questions on that? Do I have an acknowledgement?
Move to acknowledge TIF 1 and 2 reports.
Motion by Jim, second by
I'll second it.
Steve. On the question, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. Number 8, legal detail for May. Any questions on that? We have none. Would you like to acknowledge?
Motion to acknowledge legal detail for May.
Motion by Jim,
Second.
second by Linda. On the question, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed, so carried. Educational presentations and reports, there's nothing under basic government accounting, I take it.
That's a presentation.
Okay,
So this will be a repeat for some of you, but hopefully it's refresher for the others. In finance, we use governmental accounting to account for all the transactions that take place within the Village of Weston. And so it's a little bit different from your other entities. So we're just going to go through as we go into budget. When we talk about certain things, I just want you to be familiar with it. So we're going to walk through this. Okay, so we're going to talk about the introduction to government accounting, state requirements and regulations, and then last we're going to go through a current state of village finances. So for government accounting, we talk about funds. Our government accounting is oversaw by the, let's see, GASB. So a lot of times we're going to talk about the GASB statements. Back in 2004, the major statement was GASB 34 that forced us to account for our capital assets and put them on the financial statements. We are now, GASB 101, I believe, is coming out next year. So since 2020 years, we have a lot more financial standards that are guiding the way we prepare our financial statements. So we use fund accounting, and there are 3 types of funds: governmental, proprietary, and fiduciary. The governmental funds are general, special revenue, debt service, capital projects, and permanent. Here's a sample of our financial statements from 2019. We have the general fund, debt service, and then the special revenue, we have TIF and Community Development Authority, are just a couple. Governmental funds are different from your regular funds because we account for everything on a modified accrual basis of accounting. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but when you look through the monthly financial statements, our government grants account, you could see we had a revenue, I think, of maybe a couple $1,000s. The expenditures were $500,000. You're like, why did you spend more money than you had, we failed to record the revenue. So if you look at the financial statements, we have a deferred revenue at the end of 2023. When we spend that money, we have to move it to a actual revenue account to match the expenditures that we're spending during the period. So the deferred revenue is our ARPA funds. When we received the $2.1 million from ARPA, we could not count that as revenue yet to us as the Village of Weston. We can only count it as revenue when we spend it, because if we didn't spend that, the federal government would require us to pay those ARPA funds back. So that make sure you match your revenue and expenditures in the same time period. The general fund's a chief operating fund of the government. That's where our major levy monies go. Special revenue funds cannot have a majority of its revenues coming from tax levy. They usually are a specific revenue source, such as your refuse recycling fees that we put on the tax roll. They also have the pool user fees and then TIF increment, which is all non-general tax levy revenue. Okay, debt service funds that accounts for resources and payments related to long-term debt principal and interest. Capital project funds account for capital expenditures. As a reminder, don't confuse the capital projects fund with our CIP program. So we like to use CIP, and we like to throw that out there. But when we talk about the program, that encompasses all the utilities and your general governmental expenditures. But when you talk about capital projects fund, that only accounts for non-utility capital purchases. Okay, fund accounting. Fund accounting is a little bit different because each fund has to balance itself. So each fund has a cash account. Each fund has its own receivables, own revenues and expenditures. So when we record interest, we have one debt payment. But with that one debt payment, we have interest for the general fund, sewer fund, and say stormwater. Each of those funds needs to record a reduction in cash and an expense for the interest. So that's a six entry journal to record the interest for one debt payment. So it's just basically further explaining how different it is from other industry accounting. Any questions? I'm having a hard time.
Comments?
Okay. So the proprietary funds that we have in the Village of Weston are the water, sewer, and stormwater. Each proprietary fund has its major source of revenue coming from non-tax levy, which is your user fees. The internal service fund that we have on the right, that's our dental. We are self-insured for dental, so that has its own fund that has to be kept track of separately. State requirements and regulations. The finance department is responsible for many state reports, and a lot of those reports that we have to fill out and submit to the state determine the revenue that was received in state aid that following year. Some of the reports that we are responsible for is the TIF annual report, room tax report, sales tax, the municipal financial report, expenditure restraint, tax increment worksheets, statement of taxes. During budget time is of the essence, but sometimes we can only move as fast as the state releases information. Here's a general guideline of some of the dates when information is released. The TID values go out around August 6th, final numbers August 13th. August 16th, you get the personal property tax aid estimate. August 23rd, certificates of equalized value, which allows the school and technical college to do their levies. September 15th to 20th, we get estimated shared revenue payments go up. that actually changed this year. We do have an estimate for our 2025 budget already. That was done, we got that last year already. And then October 1st, the DOR notifies of the CPI for the expenditure restraint program. Which with that program, the village does receive approximately $115,000. So we have to make sure that we do qualify for that program. There's a little thing on the bottom I put, let me see, yeah. In Wisconsin, local governments are especially dependent on property taxes, much more than any other states, because the state prohibits most towns, cities, and villages from imposing sales tax. So a lot of times we hear how Wisconsin is very heavy on the property tax. And one of that reasons is because that is one of our only sources of revenue. Besides other state revenues, which are not a majority, they don't make up that much of our total revenue sources.
Now, was this the last year or is next year where the personal property tax? We won't be.
Personal property tax is done.
I
So there's
thought
a
this-
report that we have to fill out this year. That'll basically shows what we received in 2023 for personal property tax revenues. And then plus or minus some adjustments that Greg will now be putting on a real estate property tax bill. And then that difference, the state will be reimbursing us.
Could you explain that? You said Craig's putting it on the tax?
So there's a few exceptions to this rule, such as our foremost. Remember that at the Cary plant, that was put on as personal property because it's a non-taxable parcel. Because the village owns the land, so that plant,
Leasehold mortgage or leasehold improvements is they're paying leases on it or what?
they are paying lease to us to have their building on our property.
We also own the building.
We also own the building, but
But Greg was instructed that those, and Greg wouldn't assess that because it's in Rothschild, who has a different assessor, but assessors have been instructed that those go to the real estate property tax now. So they will receive a real estate property bill.
Even though they don't own the property.
That is we will receive the bill because we own the property and we will work with them for reimbursement of that. But in other cases, there
like the
will,
cell phone tower, cell leases. So the cell phone towers, they will be receiving a real estate property tax bill on that equipment that they previously paid personal property tax on.
It goes to the property owner as opposed to the owner of the tower.
that's correct.
That I don't know, because they wouldn't have the,
Go to the owner because we're the owner of Cary.
but I'm talking about where the cell towers are, there.
So I have a cell tower and I gathered the information because the assessor for the city of Weston went through a situation where all of the cell towers in the county that are on county land,
Mhm.
they're actually finding specific papers to designate that ownership differently.
Oh,
It gets recorded as part of that process.
mhm.
I didn't know where we being Weston is, but I know that I got copies of those forms so that I can have the attorney make sure they get completed, because I don't want to pay taxes on the value of that improvement. Even though you might have a hard time assessing that, because in the past, all of that from a personal property standpoint was down in Madison on most of the towers.
Mhm.
But there's a process that the county has already done to designate that this is not owned by the county. So it was, kind of getting around, having to collect it from the people. It gets billed to them, the owners
Mhm.
directly.
Yeah, Greg was working on that for the village. So yeah, there's a few different things going on with the personal property
I just
taxes
don't
here.
remember the exact year that person.
It's this year.
I thought it was in 2023, but I just couldn't remember for sure. If it was this year, I couldn't. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
So when will that affect the village?
This tax year, yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Okay, so we're gonna talk about levy limits. So a municipality may increase its levy over the prior year levy by the percentage increase in equalized value from net new construction in the preceding year. Net new construction is a very important number for the village. We are able to increase our levy by that number only. There's a few other exceptions, but this is the big one. Net new construction in prior year less any demo, destruction, or corrections in the prior year. Yes,
Does that include demo construction by the village? So when Michael builds a $10 million road, that doesn't count on that, correct?
no,
Or if,
it's only stuff that was, yeah, that's taxable.
thank you.
Mhm. The village is allowed an adjustment to increase the levy for GO debt. The total principal and interest payments due the following year. So that's one exception. That's why if things come to a head and we need money, we just need to borrow for it. But it's not a good practice to actually borrow for operations. So we have tried to shift in the past. Anything that really makes sense to be borrowed for, we shift to the CIP and kind of that allows us to basically levy for the operations that are in the general fund. So gives us a little bit more wiggle room there if we can shift stuff, but we are getting to the end of that where there's a lot less shiftable in the future. Here's an example of the equalized value and the assessed value since 2013 for the village. Way on the right, it gives you your net new construction. It's the net new number. And then the allowable is our levy increase for the last 10 years. So giving nothing else, no other increases, that is the total amount that we can increase our expenditures during the year.
I was just gonna ask, is everybody familiar with the difference between assessed and equalized?
That's later in there.
Okay. Cause I was gonna say that, I know people that get confused on that one.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later, but right now this gives the history of the equalized and then the history of the assessed and then our net new construction number and then the allowable levy. Allowable levy calculation, I think it's really important to really, I mean, last year we were pretty lucky. We had $122,000. If you look at the previous years, 86,000, 42,000. That's a very low increase when we are trying to maintain our wages to stay competitive. Health insurance increases in there. There was that fuel jump that one year. It really takes a lot of work to make sure that we can operate within the constraints that the levy limits have really put on us. Okay, this gives a really detailed idea of how does the state really track your spending, and this is the worksheet that they have us fill out. Yeah, that's interesting. There we go. So with our net new construction, you can see it was right over here, the 2.15. That is the new levy that we're able to do, and then we can add our adjustment line right here. This is the debt, so that's the total interest and principal payment that we will have in 2024 for our debt payment, and then we're able to add that in there, and then the bottom is the allowable levy. The allocation of levy. This kind of matches, but I circled in red the total allowable levy, and then you can see how it's actually allocated. With the 5.4 going to general, 1.8 to debt service. We do levy $40,000 for our aquatic center every year, and then we levy $93,000 for our capital projects. Here's the big number, the 7.1. That's the estimated amount of increment that our TIFs would be getting. Expenditure restraint program, this is the one thing this village has qualified for probably not that many years now. I'd just say 8 or 9 years now. You can only qualify if the expenditures for the next year don't exceed CPI plus 3% or CPI plus 2%. As I said before, we get $115,000 of this. And then the general fund, we allocate it between the general fund and the CIP. So the general fund got 72,000, and then the capital equipment fund got 43,000. The strategy of doing that there is because if we were to lose that expenditure restraint payment, which we anticipate not receiving next 2 years from now, so in 2026, we know our safer district will be going up significantly, which will kick us out of qualifying for this payment. So not only are we going to be down the amount we need to pay additional for safer that we can't levy for, the village is going to be taking a hit of $115,000 that we're going to have to fill that $72,000 gap in the general fund somehow. So that'll be a rough year.
So is there, when we have a shortage like that, is it just all, I mean, you can only scrimp so much. Is it a matter of, is there properties in the TIF that shouldn't be in the TIF or are necessary to be in the TIF, or is it better to keep it that way, or?
We kind of talked about it. The school would like us to close gradually. That's something we probably need to work with Ellers on. We gotta see Weston Avenue through. That's a major expense for our TIF 1. We wouldn't be splitting TIF 2. So only TIF 1. When we talk about pulling out properties, we'd only specifically be looking at TIF 1. And that's something that we could work with Ellers to pull out. I don't know. Soon, we need to do that soon, talk with them soon and see if it's in the best interest of the village to do that.
But that's after Weston is done.
Well,
After he's done.
right.
Okay.
Well, we could probably do it
Start
as
on the
we
west end or the east end, right?
What?
You start on the east end since that's gone, on the east end?
No, what we're talking about is pulling.
I understand that, but can you pull properties out on the east end since the east end's already built and you're not gonna rebuild it, I hope?
So what I'm looking for is the revenue, the increment. I want the increment coming in as long as I have these huge expenditures coming in yet.
You just want to balance it so that your revenue is coming, we don't pull so much out that we don't have enough revenue left to pay off the debt.
Ex-
Right, and that's something that we should start talking to Ellers now on, not wait 3 years from now when we have a $300,000 shortfall. And now it's how do we do this? And you can't get.
So when you take it out though, you're splitting, is it 4 ways? I mean, you got,
Yeah, you don't get the full, you
Right.
don't even get a,
Sure.
and you gotta be careful, because if we have a downturn, like we did one time,
Yeah.
we actually didn't have enough money to fund our TIF, so.
So I'm really curious this year with the decreased value in commercial. We talked to Greg Schmidt already and we're looking at a certain property and the significant decrease that that property will be paying in taxes. It's classified as commercial. I'm curious to see how the rest of the commercial are gonna come forward and how is that gonna affect our TIF district too? So,
Cause that's what happened that one year.
yeah.
We didn't have much to play with, and then,
That happened, that was a decrease over like 2 or 3 years where the state really decreased the value of our TIFs. I don't foresee that too significantly like it did in the past, but I am a little hesitant to see if there is going to be a decrease. We're very fortunate. We just had Amazon. Amazon's not going to be reflective for this year. It won't be coming on, the full amount won't be on until next year because it was not fully done January 1st of 24. So
I remember board members and some talking about taking some of the properties out of the TIF one and, you know, gradually doing that, and then all of a sudden this happened and you go, you don't want to do, I kept saying, you don't want to do that. You know, and then that happened.
Well, we're getting to the end, so 2026 is the last year of expenditures for TIF. So we're getting very close to that. And then once that does happen, where we're done spending, it won't be long after that we'll be able to close because the increment is high enough to be paying off the debt. The debt still is $12 million in that TIF. So that's a significant chunk of change. It's about 2.5 to 3 years worth of increment to pay that off. So say we're done in 2026, we need to make sure we can build up $12 million to pay off that debt, and then we can look at closing it. So making sure we have enough to cover all those expenses.
What controls are in place for safer and
What?
for the fire and police department? What controls are there as far as expenses? I mean, we were surprised, if I remember right, when Safer started and we found out there were some purchases that we weren't completely aware of and stuff like that, but
We do have 2 board members on, or 2 on Safer, 3 on Everest Metro. So,
but there's no contractual limitations as far as,
On Mountain Bay, there is now with the new department, it's a 3% increase per year. But the safer increases, it's, much of that is associated with wages and wage increase now that they've.
unionized. The union contract is, the board approved it, so we just need the union to affirm, and then that contract will be in place. And that will be a significant increase for Safers.
I know I put that on the budget memo for later and the board's been talking about it, but we anticipate around $400,000 for next year.
increase?
Yes.
Not the full amount us. That's the full amount, right?
Yeah.
Or is it all us?
No, that's not all us. It's 400,000 for safer.
We're about 75% of that.
We're gonna see about an actual 300 increase.
Mhm.
Yeah, it might be a little more, it might be a little less than the 400,000, but that's what our estimates are.
Yeah. Anything else, Jessica?
No, I think we're. Okay, here's assessed, equalized, and appraised. What's my property worth? I think this is a fun one. The assessed value. Assessed value is the value put on your property that the village assessor determines. So he puts it on based on looking at other properties. They were not in a reassessment. You just built a house. It happened in Hare Springs. The bank saw what the people paid for the house. They were withholding $8,000 for taxes for those people. Their tax bill came in about $6,000. What's the difference? Well, the bank was looking at what they paid, but because of the value of the other houses similar to those houses in Hare Springs weren't assessed at the same level that those people were paying. You only pay off the assessed values. So say they paid $525, it's only assessed at $400. It's only assessed at $400 because if you look at other houses within the village of Weston with those same characteristics, that's what they're assessed at. And so when these people came at the end, they were a $2,000 difference. The bank overheld $2,000 because of this variance here. So obviously they get their money back and hopefully their escrow gets changed going forward, but that's a big thing with assessed value. It's not necessarily what you paid, especially with the assessment ratio. So the assessment ratio is the ratio between the assessed and equalized right now. The equalized is supposed to be closer to a fair market. But anyway, the assessed is determined by our assessor. The state determines the value of manufacturing properties. So they're the properties that are considered considered manufacturing within the village are assessed by the state, that our assessor's not responsible for those. So equalized value is the value of your property given by the state. The value that is used by other taxing jurisdictions to determine their taxes. So when the school district and the county determine how much money they need from the village of Weston, they look at our equalized value. So that one year the state said, hey, your taxes are going down for the school district. And if you live in the village of Weston, your taxes actually went up. That's because the value, our assessed values were not as high as the equalized values. So if you paid taxes based on your equalized value, yes, you would have saw a decrease, but you pay taxes based on your assessed values. So state law requires assessors to be within 10% higher or lower of the state's equalized value at least once every 4 years. So the village has been under significantly that 10% law. So we are going through a reassessment right now. So as village residents, you will be receiving a letter from our assessor saying that your property has been reassessed. We are anticipating an increase in residential taxes. So because I said before commercial went down, your residential taxes on your houses are anticipated to go up, not, and you can blame the reassessment.
I was gonna say, people are gonna blame the reassessment.
They
That's
are.
absolutely nothing.
In normal circumstances, when there's not a significant increase or decrease in the value of commercial property, you would not see, everyone would go, their value would just go up to equalized and you wouldn't see much change in the taxes that you pay. You would just see a difference in the rate, the same dollar amount you would pay, very similar to previous year. This year, what's happening is commercials going down. These local businesses are going to be paying less taxes. Who has to pick it up? It's the residents. So we have lots of information they'll be sending out, hopefully to clarify any misunderstanding. But I think this is the third time I'm trying to talk to people. Don't be shocked. We are anticipating an increase for residential taxes. So
It's also not the assessor's choice, that's the market.
yes.
Right? Home market has gone up substantially. And I know Greg, our assessor, said especially in the 70s through 90s ranch style home, that the value of those homes has gone up substantially. So it's just that commercial hasn't kept that same increase at that same rate. It has increased, but that's why it seems a little askew this time, but that's the market. That's just a reflection of the market.
So why is the state decreasing the commercial? And what dictates the classification of the commercial? Is it just manufacturing or is it just
So it's not manufacturing, it's commercial.
commercial? And what does that represent? I mean, is it like Jim's building, is that commercial?
Yes.
Okay, and
But like C-Tech, that's manufacturing, right?
I'm pretty sure.
Yep, and so that would be done by the state.
The state uses sale records to determine their equalized values. They have a whole bunch of stuff. Are you familiar with it? I'm not.
I wouldn't be able to. I would assume they use the same process as Greg. They're looking at similar sales, similar styles. Has there been any improvements? They're probably looking at our records for permits. Have they taken permits? What were the values of that were added to the building? And deriving how they would get to that assessment number. So, and again, it's not that it's decreased, it's just hasn't increased as much as residential.
Here's an example. This is our 2023 Statement of Changes in Equalized Value by Class and Item. Gives you an idea of what I look at when we're going through the budget process. It gives you the beginning balance of equalized value, removal of prior year compensation. I'm not sure what that is. Economic change. So this is the big one. which is so, this is the big change that affects our numbers a lot. And it's the state looking at, like we said, that sales data and comparables and punching in those numbers. And last year you can see alone, residential went up 12% and the commercial went down 1%. And here's the manufacturing right here, around 7%. And here's the new construction as determined by the state. And then at the end here in yellow is highlighted our 2023 equalized value. And that on the top is the real estate. And then down below you can see the personal property which will be gone this year. Last year, our total increase was 1,682,640,200. A 10% increase. Here as we go, we talk about the assessed value versus the equalized value, i.e. fair market on your tax bill. And then we have the assessment ratio. So in 2020, the village was at 0.86. Appraised value. So appraised is the value of property given by an appraiser. That value is used by banks when they're looking at taking out a mortgage or refinancing a house. It is more a good look at the fair market value of your house right now. Like when you look at your equalized, that isn't what you shouldn't be using that to sell your house. You need an appraisal. So it's usually a timely guesstimate of what your house could be sold for in the market at that time. Current state of village finances. 2017 to 2024, general fund revenues by source. I think this is a really good picture here, how since 2017, the greatest portion of our revenues is property taxes. So in 2022 and 2023, property taxes were 63%. They did go down to 60% in 2024. That's only because we got an additional $381,000 in state revenue last year. So we are limited to our growth of say 2%. So that blue can go up only 2%. And those other items such as our fines and forfeitures, charges for service, interest, and miscellaneous, those, they don't go up very much. They're not controlled by your inflation or anything. They're very variable. If people are not building houses, we don't get a lot more charges for services. If we're contracting with other municipalities, our charges for services will go up, or if we're not contracting, they'll go down. So we got a few other things out here that are not dependent on the economy, but they fluctuate.
Just would also mention it, I believe it's under the other tax piece, but we lose the Rothschild piece of the agreement.
Yep.
When the annexation happened, we took a piece of what I believe was their shared revenue because of the power plant, and this year is our last year for that, so we don't receive about $100,000 next year.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the last year of that agreement.
Yeah, we've been budgeting $93,000 in our budget book. That amount is offset by the amount of the levy we have for our capital fund. So when that is gone, it won't significantly affect our general fund much. We'll just take that levy that was in the capital fund, move it back to operations. So we won't see a big hiccup there, which was really great planning from those people before me. Appreciate that. But yeah, moving forward, we're just gonna be we'll have to levy more for debt service to pay for any capital items that we want.
We harped on that for quite a few years, that be aware that's gradually.
We've been talking about it, yeah, for
Yes,
many years right now. It's finally coming.
yes, but I mean, because they were using at one time 100% of the
They were,
revenue just for general funds, and I said, you know, in the beginning, that was fine, because we had a long way to go, but
mhm,
start doing something else with it.
yeah. Comparisons, this is the last part I want to talk about. A lot of times we like to compare ourselves to others. I know it's done by every department. I want to talk about the city of Baraboo, population of 12,008. This was a while ago. This is 2012. So the population is no longer 12,008, I'm sure, but ours is more now too. So Baraboo's tax revenue for general fund was $7.5 million. The village of Weston was 4.9. The village could only levy as much as Baraboo if we passed a referendum. For tax rate comparisons, Baraboo was at $11.57, and the village was at $7.25. Baraboo's intergovernmental revenues was 3.1 compared to the village of Weston's of 1.6. So as you can see, if you get a department who's gonna compare the spending that the city of Baraboo puts on their public safety, that spends on their streets, or any other department, they can afford to do that. But when you want to bring the village of Weston in and compare, well, we don't do that much for our streets, public safety. We can't afford to. I mean, there are communities out there that are just as big as us, but they get a lot more money because they were a more mature city when the village was just a town and we didn't need those funds. So when the state stopped being very generous with their funds, Baraboo kind of got stuck in a place where, okay, your levy's this, and your intergovernmental revenue, shared revenue is this. It froze, and the village of Weston was a town at that time, and it got froze at a much lower rate. So here's a
Also, something with the annexation.
It-
I mean, not annexation, when we became a village, and we had to split some with the town. Somehow they messed it up. I mean, I guess that's all I can say. And they never corrected it.
no. So here's the 2021 budget hearing notice for the two municipalities. Just showing where they are allowed to spend a lot more, have a lot more expenditures than the village of Weston. Public safety for their 2021 budget was 5.4. Ours was 3.9. It's much significant. Even their general government was 1.5. Ours is only 1.1. And they're able to afford a lot more and able to give their taxpayers a lot more services than what we're able to do. This is a really another good spreadsheet. I was looking at City of Marinette just the other day. Their shared revenue at 4.5 million with a population of 10,000. So go down to the village of Weston, we have a population of 15,000. Our shared revenue in 2012 was just over $1 million. That is a huge difference, which this recent legislation that was at the state last year that was being discussed about this time it was passed, it was supposed to equalize this out more, but it really didn't. Marinette got the minimum amount of increase, so they got a 20% increase on their shared revenue that they were receiving, and the village got a little bit more, but we're nowhere near $4 million in shared revenue. So there's still a really great disparity amongst the municipalities and the funds that they get from the state of Wisconsin. Okay, that is all for my presentation. Do you have any questions? It was long and confusing and I apologize.
Is there a way you can send that out to the committee members so we can
Sure,
digest it more?
sure.
Can I get a written one?
A written one? Yes, a paper.
Paper one?
Yes, I can get paper.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, do you, because of the $100,000 difference, how much in percentage wise do you deduct that taxes go up? There's just 3% less in 2024.
Well, the way you asked that question, I'm gonna say, do you specifically mean residential taxes?
Residential.
See, that I'm not sure of. Greg kind of had a good estimate, but I'm not quite sure how he figured that out. We could talk to Greg and see what his thoughts were, but at this point, didn't have all the numbers he had.
The rate will go down, right? The assessment goes up, but the rate will go down. So then it might be a little bit dependent on how the assessment changes for a property and whether or not they are in that bracket where it grew, where the value grew, or if they've made changes to the property that would increase it, but we should know those numbers fairly soon because we want to put out notices at the end of August.
But it's gonna be really hard, like you said, for those in Hannah Springs, their assessment is probably not gonna change too much. But those from the 90s,
Probably much more.
a lot more.
And that's, I mean, they're newer, so they haven't had the disparity and then they've been reassessed more recently.
So it's a trick question. The tax rate's gonna go down.
I just, all the
Oh, it's a
residents
trick.
that I
The rate,
talked to,
yeah.
I mean, if they haven't made any changes and all, their taxes went down and they were happy, of course, but.
Oh, you're talking about last year?
Correct.
Yeah, last year was a special year, though. I mean, the state gave out a ton of money last year, and that really helped. So a lot of them didn't have to increase their taxes, their levy, I should say, as much as they did in the past. But there's no large increase this year. I feel it's gonna go back to normal where everyone's gonna be maxing out the amount of levy that they can levy.
I will say Greg will have the assessor will have most of the month of September that he will be available for open book. So if there are residents that have questions or they get that reassessment letter and they need help, Greg will have available appointments that you can either call or do online to book a time frame with him. So most of the month of September would be available to work through any concerns.
It's gonna be hard this year, as you always tell people, just because you got a reassessment, doesn't mean your taxes are gonna go up, because if we need 100,000, we need 100,000 no matter what your assessed value is, and that's what it'd be taxed for. But now, because of the other property value going down, now we're gonna, we still need that 100,000. Now we gotta pick up more of that money to pay it.
Yeah, it's gonna be really hard explaining that to
You're right,
people.
because I know in Wassa, they were all hollering, and thinking their taxes were gonna double because their assessment rate went up, or equalized value rate went up. And
Their assessed value went up a
assessed,
lot.
and yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, no, not necessarily, unless, like Weston, we had something else going on.
Yeah, which I think it's happening out throughout the state
Yeah.
now.
Having in Schofield, Town of Maine, and Rothschild so far, so.
Yeah, I received my reassessment letter for the city of Schofield and my jaw dropped. It went up, was it 200%? Yeah, it went up a lot.
Almost 90%.
I'd say 200. It went up way a lot. And so, just as long as my neighbors went up that much too, I'll be happy.
And I know one year they just assessed vacant or land values.
I think that was around 2007. So the village has been struggling with maintaining the ratio in a good range. In 2007, when a lot of the values dropped, Greg went through and reassessed just their land that was overvalued, and he got us within that range again. but
Well, because I know at the 2 acres, they assessed the one with the house on it and then the other acre, even though it's not the frontage enough to build. He put on different, valued that not as being my house and 2 acres, it was my house and 1 acre plus an acre, and that really. Pocket.
Not a good feeling.
Yeah. Okay, anything, other questions or concerns? Jessica, anything else you'd like to add?
not on that topic.
Okay. Then do we go to item 10?
So trustee Pincinel asked about our financial policies. We emailed them to him, but I thought it was a great idea to get it out to all of finance HR committee. We have a handful of policies that guide our finance department. The most recent was approved in 2022 to approve with grant rules and regulations for procurement. It's a goal of the finance department to really put together a handbook. Song and I talked, we got a couple things that we really feel we need to bring forward in the futures. But yeah, that's what we have. I guess there's no action, just to let you know, these are some of the policies we follow. Yes,
I have many of them. So it looks like some of this stuff hasn't been updated in almost 20 years, right?
right.
Do you want questions or additions or corrections to that now, or when do you want that?
We plan on bringing them up individually.
Do you want me to get with you after?
Sure.
Okay, can do that. Carry on.
Okay, any other questions or comments on that issue? Okay, and then item 11, feedback on preliminary draft of annual performance review.
That one's mine. We had talked at the last meeting about that we'd like to do an update to the evaluation form to more closely align with the strategic plan. So what's in the packet is the individual pages are the values of the strategic plan, respect, integrity, continuous improvement. And then this would be both a self and a supervisor evaluation that would have a ranking criteria. If you were in a management position, it's 35 points, and in a non-supervisory role, 30 points. And then an opportunity to include individual goals and to have some self-reflective questions in addition to the supervisor completing some questions for each staff member. So I just wanted to, it's not complete, obviously, there's some pieces missing, but wanted to share it with the committee and get some thoughts and feedback.
I guess I would kind of like ask Linda and Steve, being that you were on the HR and I am not familiar other than what we get at the board meetings, is this the improvement? Is this something?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I assume it would be, but.
Company's format, because I had sent in, I think some of the HR committee members sent in some samples of consideration. And I believe you used an electronic platform previously.
We did have an electronic platform, but then that company or that platform ceased to exist. So then we
Okay.
had just an Excel document that was
Got it.
developed for a couple
Okay.
years. I'm not sure how long ago it was that we didn't have that electronic platform,
Okay.
but for a number of years we
You
did.
did have it, okay. No, I like the format. It gives some good objective scoring mechanism. I like that you have the employee self-assessment and then the supervisor assessment. My only question is really for Michael. Because I know, Michael, you've got some pretty good criteria for your staff member. Is there room to build in? I know we've got individual goals at the end without ratings. I'm wondering if you build in a goal or two that is worth another scoring mechanism, so it's individual. So for like Mike's staff, I know you've got, if you need this, then this. I don't know if you can rank that on a 1 to 5 scale. Do you build in extra for personal goals or department-specific goals so that each department manager could have a department-specific goal or two? Just a thought.
Michael had identified that too, because there's a separate assessment to make sure that you can operate this piece of equipment, that you've achieved this level. And we can work that in as a page for those that are within Public Works that should have those skills.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there might be value in department specific goal, because you think about the other departments and there might be goals outside of the strategic as well that are very focused on the department. So maybe build in a separate, in the same mechanism that you have laid out where you identify what a 1 rating is up to that 5 rating for those department specifics.
Yeah, and I guess just looking at what was built here, I guess that's where I was thinking. I think my feedback to Jamie was using, in the job specific, understands, performs the duties. Yes, can you do your tasks? The continuous improvement, year over year, we can look at, how much did you grow? What did you learn in your role? So I guess, yeah, I was trying to think of how do we use what we have currently and try to just blend it into this so it's not an add-on, but kind of a backup data source almost to justify why it is what it is, so.
And if the department doesn't have any department specifics, then you just average them out based off of the current ones that you have.
Because that was I was looking at them and going, well, okay, how does this compare to, and although I had looked at them, I didn't work with it, so it really,
There's no perfect tool. And I think at the end of the day, we have to remember this is a tool to help us manage performance. And to make equitable pay decisions as well.
Jimmy, you have any questions?
No, I think it's done really well. I mean, obviously there's some blanks to get filled in yet, right? But between this and I have seen Michael's evaluation sheet before, and I think that's done very, very well. I don't see why that couldn't get done in every department, really. I mean, from parks to finance to clerks to, I mean, he has kind of every piece of equipment. Well, it could be every lever that you pull in finance, right? And maybe there's some ones that Song doesn't do yet, but she could do or learn to do, right? Or that could be a goal. Cause you won't be here forever, right? Someday you're gonna retire, Jessica. Song's gonna take your spot. But yeah, no, I think it's really good.
All right, I guess, do you want any action on any of
No,
these?
I just wanted to get feedback. You'll see it
Okay.
again. Yep.
Yeah, okay, I figured so, but I just thought it, rather than going forward, I'd check. Okay, any other questions, concerns before we move on? Okay, then, policy issues. 12, results of citizen committee commission members pay frequency survey.
So I just had a brief memo in the packet. We did send out the survey. It was sent to 27 citizen committee members. We had the 12 responses. It wasn't really overwhelming to change. I'm not sure, given the fact that it wasn't significant that people wanted to be paid more often, if we want to make a change.
I read that and it was obvious that I don't know that it makes a difference. So rather than cutting checks twice a year or 4 times a year, I think it adds more work. I would recommend that we leave it as is. Otherwise, I think it's just more work for your staff.
Why did you have such a poor response?
No, I sent it out twice, so I gave them all a reminder. A piece of me wonders if, because it wasn't significantly more, maybe people were just like, it doesn't matter, so it didn't bother them. Some people might feel like it's kind of a volunteer piece, so they just chose not to
We had
reply.
people surprised that they got paid for it. Yeah. They said, well, I didn't
Agreed,
know.
I'm just very disappointed that you had 12 out of 27
Yeah.
respond. If the response was, I don't care, no preference or something. You don't get a response, that's not acceptable.
I get the impression if you don't respond, you don't care, one way or the other.
I check my emails only before I come to the meeting, so I
So you didn't
Village.
respond either then,
I didn't respond. I feel bad about that, Jim, now. I didn't know it upset you.
Okay, I'll tease you more again later.
I have mine set up to come to a different email, otherwise I would
Really?
never go on. So every email I get through the village, it's forwarded to my personal, and I read that all the time.
I'm not smart enough to do
I can help you.
It's really advantageous.
Alright, so, do you want some action on that, or?
I don't think you need to take action. I think we'll just have the minutes reflect that it wasn't statistically significant and we'll maintain status quo.
Okay. Okay. 2025 budget.
You want me to start? You wanna add in? Do you wanna
You
start?
want to start with your RFC?
Yeah, so I sent out late on Friday, I'm sorry, it was just a means of trying to 2025 budgets, it's a really broad topic to try and get a starting point to it. So the RFC that I had sent out, the memo I had sent out just talked a little bit about how a lot of the information that we need for budget, we don't really have yet. We don't get until later on in the year, August, September. So right now, maybe a good place to start are things that we've identified that will be concerns for the budget. And I had just some bullet points as part of the RFC, but also just talking about priorities. Focusing on what are the priorities, because other things would, if we identify those, we will know things that we need to raise to the top before other things would be added
Okay, any questions or?
in. You wanna
I'll
add
bring
anything
it up.
to that, Jessica?
Let me bring it up. I'm just, it's okay. Right here. Here. Okay. I guess one of the, when we first put it on, we wanted to talk about the CIP, the difference of CIP and what we're looking at wages. So that's one of the things. And then we had email from Jim, wanted it more broad. So I guess this is open for discussions of how we can improve and ideas for presenting the 2025 budget. And Jamie thought it was a great idea to really just start with priorities, so, which we haven't really done before, so I'm excited to see if we can get some priorities in line.
I mean, sometimes I know in the past we've asked, well, you have something, well, you can't have it all. What are your priorities, And they had to pick what they thought was, because it's like, can't have it all, so. And it usually was the street department that had the biggest, having to decide where. But that's office too, so.
I know we have in the packet, Jessica updated the general fund breakdown by category, just to kind of give the perspective of, there's not a lot of discretionary within the budget. 51% is really fixed costs. A lot of that is police and fire and personnel wages, right? Like there's, and personnel, I think, is actually accounted for separately up there on the 20%. So between police, fire, insurance, and municipal court, which now is transitioned over, 51% of the budget is fixed cost and contracts.
Yeah, so
Okay, so that's our 23 number, right?
actually, it's 2024 budget.
Sure, so we'll use our 24 number. Yeah, right, okay, got it, because we're doing a 25 budget, right? But we know nothing is gonna cost less next year. Right? So all of those numbers are going to be more. And what is our plan as a finance committee to negotiate that? How do we overcome that obstacle?
We actually work on it here, but it goes to the board and that's where you have your work sessions and it falls pretty much on finance committee to
So here we are, right? I wanna
I
talk
mean,
about
the
this in,
finance
I wanna talk about this in
department.
June, so it's not October and an emergency. I get it, we don't know what the new numbers are of what we're getting for dollars. But there was talk last month of a 3% raise. Okay, so you're gonna take that number and add 3% to it? Or that already has your 3% built in?
No, this is the 2024 budget, so they,
Sure, right, so you need to add 3% to that number, but you don't have more money to do that yet. Your health insurance, last year we had a how much increase?
10.2.
Perfect, and I also have Spectrum and mine was the same. So I'm not gonna tell you that yours is the same this year, but I can tell you that I had an 11% increase this year. So I'm gonna tell you, I don't know that you'll have an 11% increase this year, but if you're not budgeting for an 11% increase, you're wrong.
Mhm.
Like all of this stuff, what savings will be realized by Mountain Bay Metropolitan Police Department?
I don't think there's gonna be any savings.
There's a 3% increase.
For the contract, so it'll be, that also will be 3% more.
So what do you say?
That's built in, the
Come
3%.
back with the,
That's,
I'm just, I don't understand. I just don't understand, like. If our costs are going to be increased and we're not necessarily getting more money to do that.
Well, we do have some increase in shared revenue, understanding we're just offsetting the.
36,000.
Yep, so we have some increase there. We can likely, we can hope around 100,000 in levy increase. But, you know, we have a serious conversation on the board tonight about SAFER and how we would want, if that's understanding a percentage of 400,000, what are potentials to proceed there, right?
Do you have the ability to negotiate your contracts? Like, are they renewed every
So the
year?
only contract, the Village of Weston does not have any union contracts. The
So-
contracts are for our Mountain Bay, which is, we are a representative, but that's not our. And then SAFER, we are a representative, but, and that one is just maybe settled. That was just negotiated.
it's kind of like the county and they're all of them, they say, here's what we need. Other than talk to our board members and say, you know, try to change it, but when they hand the dollar amount down, we don't really have any say in it.
except didn't Cromwell just pull out of, Riverside?
They have to finish out a remaining term of the contract, and so that they'll be there for a little while, but they will need to create their own EMS service.
Right, but if, I guess it boils down to, if you can't afford to participate in what's there, do you do it yourself or not? And go back, I'm not saying we should go back, I'm just saying that it seems an exceptionally large increase. For 400,000, just seems not on the board anymore, so. I can
Well,
throw stones
yeah,
at it.
that's, but that is, you're talking, the 400,000 is the SAFER, which is the fire EMS.
Right.
And the issue is the fact that they unionized.
And I think Chief Finke, in the memo that he put together, one of the pieces that he put in there was staffing, was service. Do you want a different degree of service? I mean, I think that that was one of the perspectives that he shared, that again, would have to be something that both us and Rib Mountain talk about. If you have less of those, some piece of that service, is that something that we want to consider? In addition to referendum question or a fire fee. We have already looked at so SAFER, between us and Rib Mountain, our ownership, but they have other series of contracts with different municipalities, either for fire EMS or fire and EMS. And they've looked at those contracts and increased those, taken the increases that they could on those already, but I think that was $20,000-$30,000. It wasn't significant off of the total dollar amount needed.
I know they were always concerned of raising it too much, that they would go somewhere else and then you'd lose the whole revenue stream.
Or raising the fees when you need to utilize the service is not
Right.
always advantageous either.
I seem to remember though that, the issues with not merging into Wausau was because, you know, they had you know, it was 24/7 with their paramedics and the training, there was exceptionally large cost to all of that stuff and whether you needed to have all of that at every location or not. And it did go around in circles and it ended up that it never did get merged in. And that goes back quite a few years.
Well, yeah, and then we also had people just didn't want us to work. Just
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
period.
I always looked at the number side, but I guess, but
Yeah.
it just seemed to be exceptionally expensive that time to merge in there. Which would, what would you benefit be?
Well, actually, when we originally merged with Rib Mountain, our fire department was unionized. Rib Mountains was not, and that was part of the savings. And now we're.
Then Jerry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't.
Well, actually, Michael was first.
Oh, okay.
Do him first.
I was just gonna say, usually when these questions have come up in the past, we look at the orange part, right? Like, trustee Ermeling brought it up earlier, streets is generally the one where we go, okay, next year we'll just do $100,000 less of maintenance and the following year, hopefully our transportation aids will catch up and we can then, get back on track the following year. Do we ever get back on track? No, but again, Jessica mentioned it in the beginning, we can look at what other people spend, we can look at our comparables, but we don't necessarily have the same shared revenue or even levy ability of other communities. And it's, I don't know, almost a sense of pride at some point with staff of being able to get stuff done, in-house or with our tools, our abilities that other people do have to contract for, because it is generally a savings. I looked at Baraboo quickly. We have roughly twice as many road miles as Baraboo, and they have more in their budget annually. So we maintain almost twice as many miles with less money than what they have. So, we look at those things, can we crack seal on ourselves instead of hiring that out? How do we still maintain our assets without, breaking the bank? So I guess that is what I do, at least from the public works side, where I think I'm about 25% of the general fund. So it's a big chunk of that.
What about other revenue or getting creative with stuff or other costs that are maybe not necessary? Like there's vacant space above this boardroom, but we paid to heat and cool for 2 years. That to me, I'm looking at this from a business perspective, and I don't know if there's some legal ramifications or if you can't lease that space out, but I see no reason why we have that huge public safety building and the town of Weston is in there for 15 minutes a month. That's crap. If they need to meet, they can meet in this boardroom and we can lease it to them. If they need permanent offices, we've got a beautiful corner office right above this that we can lease to them for less than they pay over there. I mean, I don't think they pay anything or they pay peanuts for over there. but they
Pay
can take
just
real
over
money.
$3,000.
Say again?
Just over $3,000 they pay for that,
A year? And why do we let that happen?
because the board has refused to increase it over the years. And they also get IT and phone included.
Okay, so that's a good spot for a staff referral at the board.
I don't
You
know
got
where
it.
we are in that current lease agreement, so we would just have to see where we are in years. I think that agreement was signed for a number of years.
I don't think you can get a trailer in Stillwater Landing for a year for $3,000. So that's crap if you get a commercial building with all the utilities for $3,000. Can't.
We have talked about leasing the space upstairs. I don't know that we have heavily pursued anyone, but it's been a conversation. My understanding is at some point when the building was built, there was talk about that maybe being a library space, but that didn't coordinate out. So, that would be another possibility to lease. We haven't heavily advertised it, but if people have asked questions,
So how do we put that in motion, right? We already see we have a budget shortfall. We have revenue generating ability or underperforming parcels. why are we not, first off, why wasn't this taken care of 20 years ago? But that's a yesterday Jim problem, because yesterday Jim wasn't here. Today, Jim, why are we not doing this? And why are we not doing it today? Because this stuff isn't going away. That's 11% more for healthcare coming this year that you don't, we can't even maintain what we have here. And we're gonna add all this other stuff to it. It's unrealistic.
I really feel that public safety building is a really good opportunity. It's definitely. There's a really good GFOA, Government Finance Officers of America, GFOA article on using the assets that you have. I brought it to this committee or to the finance committee maybe a year or two ago. I'll have to bring it to this committee. It's really an interesting article, is using the assets that you have. Out of that, we kind of joked we're gonna have a campground at one of our parks. Which park is that?
Prohaska.
Prohaska Park, and that's an asset we have not being used, a campground. I mean, it was just kind of a joking, but that's the type of mind frame you need to be in to brainstorm and create different ideas of generating revenue with the state not really allowing us to maintain services with the current laws.
That was one of the questions I was gonna have, if we had any thoughts of what we're doing with the vacant area in the safety building. I mean, that just sits there and costs money.
It was just vacated a couple months ago,
I know,
so,
but I mean, do we have any thoughts or what, I mean,
Yeah, so Chief Finke has a couple thoughts. Would that utilize the whole space? Probably not, but this was shared at the SAFER meeting, but there's a lot of potential for internships through fire service where maybe we would have students that would actually live in the building, we would be renting to them essentially as they went through fire service. And then we talked about the potential of those students would be the facilitators of that space and could rent out the space that the town is in. We've had some inquiries about people wanting to utilize more community use space for meetings or for birthdays or small gatherings. And then they would be essentially in charge of doing that booking and facilitation. So that was one potential, but we've also talked about, should we lease it out another way? But again, we've got a lot of stuff in that building yet, and I think we just wanted to give it a little time in case we needed to utilize those things. We didn't just want to get rid of all of the equipment and stuff that was there. So at this moment it's being stored there, but there's a potential maybe SAFER could use a larger percentage.
because I know one of the thoughts that when we built that back part so that we could bring their squads indoors and we had all the ventilation, and it cost a lot of money. It's not, that was not intriguing, but that's besides the point. And I'm just looking at that and going, now here it sits with all that money and nobody's using it.
But that's what the problem is, Barb. The problem is, no one has said, make that property make money. If this was your property, Barb, you would tear all of your hair out. This would last 5 minutes and you'd say, no, we're done, we're selling the property.
Well, that's why they said the building is vacated, but I'm already
No,
concerned.
not just was vacated, we've been out of there for weeks. So how long are you gonna live at Stillwater Landing for free?
Well, I know.
Cause I bet you, he'll let you live
Well,
there
that's why
exactly
I was-
0 days for free.
Yeah, that's why.
And
I
that's some
was-
high rent business, so we're not. It's not that caliber of building. Right?
The improvements that were made were expensive improvements, and I'd like to see some revenue.
Some return on investment,
Right.
and so to do that, we have to, the board or the finance committee needs to recommend to the board, is that what I'm hearing?
I think it would be great, that there would be a recommendation that is something that you'd like us to pursue. Right.
And we don't have it on the agenda, so I don't.
Well, we're talking about generating revenue for the 2025 budget, so.
Would you like to make a recommendation to the board or the staff to research this?
I absolutely would. So I've got a couple of motions I'd like to make,
Okay,
Madam Chair. So the first motion I'd like to make is to for the town of Weston lease in the public safety building to the Board of Trustees and the Finance Committee for review.
That's just to bring it back here.
So that so everyone gets it, so we all know what we.
I don't know if that needs to be a motion, we could just add that under next agenda. We wouldn't have to act on that, that could just be part of next
We'll
agenda.
just
Would be a review
make
of
it happening.
the town of Weston, please, yeah.
Very well.
Would it be possible at the same time, to bring back these costs and fees? I mean, you charge a certain amount for using an excavator there or something like that. Is there a way to
Of the
manage?
town?
Yeah, for the town.
Yeah, we use the DOT rates and those get updated annually.
That got
Maybe the
approved.
DOT isn't doing
Can you charge more than that?
Well, our agreement with the town says we'll use it that way. I mean, every year, the DOT rates are created by the county highway departments who track all their costs for an excavator, a dump truck. You know, they have all that data because they bill the state for it. So the state, they use that data to create those rates. So I mean, I guess in lieu of me trying to track that and figure out how much money should we charge for a dump truck, I mean, it changes with fuel costs, it changes with labor, equipment costs, so I think that'd be a tough one to try to come up to an agreement with the town saying, okay, that dump truck isn't, 67.50 an hour, it's actually 72 an hour. I think that'd be a tough one.
We do charge an admin fee on our rates. We take the highest employees rate in that classification and then we add it with the benefits and then add an admin fee on for our time.
Yeah.
There's a
To
buffer.
that point, Steve, the DOT rates on this stuff are fairly realistic though, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you were to call PGA or somebody to show up with a dump truck, that's what it's gonna cost you. Yeah, and there's dollars billed for the operator and the equipment.
Well, I know, I've seen it, but I'm just saying that it,
We can bring it back.
if the fees that are kept up with.
Yeah, no, I think it's.
We make money. I can tell you that. What we charge the town for an hour of plowing in the town is more than it actually costs us to plow an hour in the town. Our rates, for the most part, are higher than a local contractor's rates would be. It's just no other contractor is equipped to go plow the town of Weston, and we don't. I don't know how, when I started here, we did a lot of work for the town. And I shouldn't say but we've reprioritized working in the village of Weston first and working for the town second, because we would do 2, 3, 4 weeks of work in the town of Weston. And all of a sudden we're paying contractor X 60 grand to do something in the village. And it was like, wait, this is backwards. We should be doing work in the village with our equipment, our people. And then the town can contract out with somebody else to do that. So in the last, I'd say 10 years, we tell the town no a lot more than I think historically they were ever told no. And they hire their own people now to do culvert repairs and, whatever side ditching projects, stuff like that. We really only respond in, an emergency type situations where there's a storm and somebody needs to clear a tree that's blocking a road. And snow plowing, those are really the two main things we do, and ditch mowing, just because we have the ditch mowing tractor, I guess.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion to refer staff to explore opportunities to lease village spaces for potential revenue generation. And I'll leave that very generic, lease village spaces. Doesn't have to be the vacant room above us. It could be, I don't know, a vacant parcel that you lease to a farmer to, I don't know, plant soybeans or something crazy.
second to that?
And a second.
Okay, second, Linda. On the question? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Anything else? Yep,
I think that should get us started.
okay. Anybody have anything else they want to add? Okay.
Do I have to amend that motion to have it for July? Or not later than the July meeting?
Oh, it would be on the July agenda.
Well, one would think, but I think we talked about playground equipment one time and that didn't happen for 2 months, so we had kind of snipped on that. So I'd like to amend that motion. Can I amend my own motion?
I think you're just saying you wanna have that recommendation about leasing spaces on the July on the July village board meeting.
Village board and finance.
Finance.
Yes,
We was
please.
just saying if you can make sure that the minutes reflect that, I think that's sufficient.
Thank you.
Anything else, Jessica, you want to add to your reports or?
No, if you have any more recommendations for the 2025 budget, we're definitely willing to change. We're definitely open for changing in the way that we handle the budget, always looking for ideas and enthusiasm. So just give me an email, please. Or call. I'm there.
So we have no resolutions or ordinances. Future items, we do have the, your motion. And what else was all on there? Future topics. There was 2 items I know we added for next month.
We can revisit probably budget again. And I can try to get a further updated evaluation to share before we get to fall to evaluate.
Motion he just made, plus we had the, other,
We'll have the review of the town of Weston lease.
right. Okay, anything else that we would like on the agenda for next month? Okay, any remarks from staff? Any remarks from committee members? Jim?
I have none.
No.
Okay. And I have none. Any announcements?
No.
So a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Adjourn the finance committee.
Jim? Second. Fred, and all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We are adjourned at 5:50.
Thank you.
So can